The miracle doctor won't be a kept man. My heart belongs ashore. Chapter 371. Seemingly oblivious to Snow's anger, Kiran went on, I'm going to watch her put it on and then, I'm divorcing you, Snow snapped, cutting him off. Kiran was stunned for a moment before erupting into laughter. You're not jealous, are you? Jealous, my ass. Snow hissed and tried to break away from his embrace. Your ass? How about your boobs? Kiran teased her relentlessly. Go to hell, bastard. Snow raged like a mad woman. If you don't tell me where you got the outfit, I'm going to take yours, Kiran informed her seriously. First, Snow was about to explode. How would she live if other people found out the outfit was hers? Ha ha ha. Kiran chortled and hugged her tighter. Snow tried to break free but gave up in the end due to her lack of strength. Let's get down to business. Just when she started to get frustrated, Kiran suddenly changed the subject. Snow's cheeks were still red, but she fixed him with a cautious stare. What business? Get dressed now, and I'll take you to Lillian's place. I'm not going, Snow refused tersely. I need you to practice the harp with her while I meet Lindsay, Kiran explained. The mention of Lindsay reminded Snow of his question about the maid ensemble, which only reinforced her stubbornness. Not a chance. Kiran caressed her cheek tenderly. I'm not going to do anything bad, silly girl. I wouldn't know if you did. Snow had regained her composure. She knew he was telling the truth, but she continued to feign haughtiness. You know, once upon a time there was a royal advisor who sent a set of women's clothes to the enemy kingdom's general to mock him for being a spineless coward, said Kiran. You want to provoke Lindsay? Snow was completely calm now. Kiran nodded. That's right. He withdrew his arms from her. Given PowerHub Investment Group's absolute confidence in their power, can you imagine how mad Lindsay will be if I give her a maid outfit? Snow's beautiful eyes lit up. To her surprise, she realized she found delight in making mischief like Serena. Staring at Kiran, she raised an eyebrow and asked, What are you trying to achieve by provoking her? Her family's butler, Wendell, told me that if I want to learn more about PowerHub's secrets, I shouldn't kill Lindsay. That's why I've decided to humiliate her and goad her into getting revenge, then use her as a lead to slowly discover more clues about PowerHub. After pondering briefly, Snow nodded and looked at him. I get what you mean. The thing is, I don't know where to buy that maid outfit. It was a gift from Serena. Kiran stroked his nose. I guess that perv knows stuff like this best. How about you take mine? Snow asked, tentatively. Okay, I'll buy a new one for you another time, Kiran agreed with a smile. Don't you dare. Snow hurriedly refused and swore to herself not to wear it anymore. Sure, Kiran complied readily. That's more like it. Snow was pleased. I'll buy a nurse outfit or a stewardess outfit. Or maybe a wow. He felt a sharp pain in his armpit. If you don't stop behaving like a scoundrel, I'll turn you into a monk. Snow was utterly embarrassed. Kiran raised his hands in surrender. Snow could not bear to pinch him hard anyway, and she soon let go. You can take it, but I'm not going to Lillian's place. You have to go, Kiran insisted, his expression grave. Why? Snow huffed. On the one hand, you can learn the harp and practice the joyful odyssey with her. On the other, her affiliation to the Imperial Dragon can help me obtain more information, Kiran explained. At his words, the reluctance on Snow's face vanished. She inclined her head, though somewhat sulkily. Yeah, you're always right. I'm not. You're the one who's always right. Kiran grinned. That's more like it. Finally appeased, Snow shot him a smug look. Kiran stroked his chin, thinking, That's because I can never win an argument with you, however. He could never say that out loud, or Snow would throw a tantrum. Snow bustled off to pack her stuff and the maid outfit for him. Half an hour later, they left home. Kiran drove Snow straight to Neptune's Cove karaoke. Snow was as reluctant as a child sent to kindergarten by her parents, and Kiran had to hold her and coax her inside. Upstairs, Lillian sensed Kiran's presence the moment he arrived. As she watched Snow grumbling and Kiran coaxing her from the window, a strange bitterness welled up within her. In less than 2 minutes, the couple appeared outside her door. Before Kiran could open it, Lillian flung out her arm angrily and sent it flying open with a blast of internal force. Honey, Kiran called out casually. Lillian's heart thumped, and she blushed, thinking he was calling out to her. Look how excited Lillian is to see you. Kiran sucked in a breath before directing his next words towards Snow. Lillian froze in an indescribable feeling of shame and rage. Kiran sneaked a peek at her face and smirked. Knowing he was messing with Lillian, Snow dug her elbow into his ribs. Watch your tongue. Yes, ma'am. Kiran pretended to cower in pain and fear. Their affectionate banter irked Lillian even more. she asked coldly. "Is there something you need?" "My wife is here to learn how to play the joyful Odyssey on the harp," Kiran said matter-of-factly. "I'm not teaching her," Lillian immediately demurred. "Don't be so petty." Unfazed, Kiran handed the bag containing the maid outfit to her. "Here's a gift from your new pupil." Unaware of its contents, Lillian accepted it out of curiosity and opened it. A glance was enough to tell her what it was, and her features contorted with wrath. "Go to hell, scoundrel!" She hurled the bag at him. Kiran caught it and flashed her a thumbs up, an expression of mock respect on his face. "You're so noble and upright, you don't even need a gift to take in a new pupil." "Thank you." He gave Snow a pat on her shoulder. "Happy learning, honey." With that, he spun on his heel and raced off. "Kiran!" Lillian and Snow shouted at the same time. The former's voice was thick with fury, sounding as if she wanted to stab him to death. However, the latter sounded distressed at having to part with him. Without looking back, he dashed off with an excited and triumphant grin. He knew Lillian would teach Snow, for she had a warm heart under her frosty exterior. He also hoped Snow would improve. Just then, his cell phone rang. It was a call from Serena. Chapter 372. Kiran answered the call with a smile. "So, where is Lindsay staying?" "Bayville Hotel," Serena chirped. Kiran chuckled at her reply. What a coincidence that they had chosen Yvonne's modest domain. Apparently, there was a certain charm to it. "I'm on my way." "I'll be waiting for you." Serena hung up. Beaming proudly, she gazed at the photo of Lindsay she had taken at the airport. The highlighted parts in particular were mesmerizing even in a woman's eyes. "Damn, she's hot." The corners of her mouth curved up, and she could not help but exclaim in amazement. "She sure is, isn't she?" A man's voice came out of nowhere. Serena was stunned for a second, before swiveling in the direction of the voice, only to find a tall, dark-skinned man smiling at her. However, his smile carried a cold murderousness. Serena was immediately on her toes when she recognized him as one of Lindsay's bodyguards. Had they discovered her following them? "Open the door, will you? I don't want to resort to violence," the man continued. "I think the fuck not," Serena spat before jamming her foot down on the gas and speeding off. "Ooh." In a flash, the man materialized before her accelerating car. Serena snarled. "I'm gonna run over you, dumbass." She floored the gas pedal and sent the car zooming toward the man like an arrow. The man sneered fearlessly and slammed his right fist on the car hood. Serena's car alarm began blaring. Even the airbags deployed, and the car came to an abrupt halt. His strength elicited an apprehensive expression on her face. The next second, the man disappeared from her field of vision. Before she knew it, the car door swung open, and the man struck her on the neck with the edge of his palm, knocking her out instantly. He dragged her out of the car and pulled her along as he left. Meanwhile, Lindsay was sitting on a couch upstairs. She had just taken a shower, and her face was bare, but she was no less enchanting. She was indeed a natural beauty. She was clothed in black, tight-fitting silk pajamas, which emphasized her curvy figure. The low neckline offered an indistinct, mesmerizing view of what was underneath. Her calves and feet under her pajamas were as dazzling as snow. She seemed particularly proud of her dainty feet as her gaze slid to them occasionally. The cup of steaming coffee in front of her, and the soft, melodious music wafting in the air gave the room a warm, romantic atmosphere. Buzz. Her phone vibrated with an incoming message. She picked it up and opened it. The corners of her mouth lifted, and she typed a four-word reply. "Take her into hiding." She set down her phone, a bewitching smirk playing on her lips. "I'm here, Kiran. I'll play your game, so you'd better prove you can keep up." She laughed a silvery, self-assured laugh. Meanwhile, Kiran arrived at Bayville Hotel. He drove to the parking lot and found Serena's car left there. His head spun with shock. He immediately knew something was wrong. He quickly parked his car in front of Serena's and got out to investigate. There was no one in the car, only her cell phone. The airbag had deployed, and one of the doors was on the ground, an obvious result of violent damage. Kiran's gaze turned cold as he concluded Serena might have been kidnapped. He picked up her phone and stalked toward the hotel building. When he reached the entrance, he tossed his keys to the security guard and instructed him to park his car. Then, he went upstairs to Yvonne's place in room No. Without bothering to knock, he pushed the door open and strode in. Yvonne was wearing a white V-neck long-sleeved sweater. A white platinum necklace dangled from her pale neck, and her hair was swept into a high bun, giving her an elegant charm. She was going through a stack of documents at her desk. When she saw Kiran enter, her face lit up with joy. She shot to her feet and approached him briskly, her long and shapely legs clad in blue straight-leg jeans. Her rapid walking pace accentuated the captivating shape of her slender legs, and the off-white belt tied around her waist added a casual, unique touch to her look. Her heels, clacking on the floor, represented her inner agitation and delight. Although Kiran had to admit that Yvonne was stunning, he had no intention of admiring her. Instead, he raised his head and said, "I want to see the surveillance footage of the hotel parking lot." Yvonne blinked in astonishment but did not ask why. "Follow me." She wheeled around and led the way in her high heels. A stony-faced Kiran followed. Yvonne was undoubtedly a babe, and her gait could surpass that of a model any day. With every step, her assets were highlighted, which could stir up a man's heart. If it were any other man, he would have conjured up all sorts of fantasies in his mind. However, Kiran did not pay her any notice. He was busy mulling over Serena's kidnapper, who he suspected was Lindsay. Yvonne blushed a little as she walked ahead of him, eager for his attention, but to her disappointment, Kiran's eyes never fell on her. Mixed emotions swirled in her. Was she not attractive in the slightest? How could he feel nothing for her at all? This made her heart feel heavy and wounded. Nevertheless, it solidified her determination to make him her man. Yvonne found this desire growing stronger and stronger. A different sort of yearning seemed to overtake her body. She knew this was not yearning, but the blooming of vitality. They arrived at the control room without exchanging a single word. When the officer on duty saw Yvonne, he quickly stood up. "Hello, Miss Yvonne. Show me the surveillance footage of the hotel parking lot," Yvonne commanded. The officer immediately found the footage. Kiran drew nearer and started watching. Soon, he spotted a man stopping Serena's car and taking her away. Although he did not know the man's name, he knew he was one of Lindsay's bodyguards from the photos Serena had sent him. "I have what I need. Let's go." He whirled around and headed outside. Yvonne was startled that Serena had been kidnapped. "Is Serena all right?" Kiran shook his head. "I don't know. We'll talk about that later." This time, Yvonne was the one following him. As she gazed at his thin but masculine figure, she longed to rush over and hug him from behind. "Ask the receptionist to check which room Lindsay's staying in," Kiran ordered. "It's the one across from mine," Yvonne answered. Kiran was taken aback. Chapter 373. Yvonne quickly explained, "I like the quiet, so the suite opposite is usually unoccupied. But today, the front desk contacted me and said that a woman named Lindsay Ludwig requested a quiet room and offered 3 times the original price. So I agreed." "For the money?" Kiran asked. Yvonne blushed and shook her head. "You think I'd need that bit of money?" "Then why?" Kiran was curious. "Given the recent turbulent state of affairs in Bayville, I gathered that the arrival of a rich and beautiful woman likely had something to do with you." A hint of bitterness appeared in Yvonne's eyes. Kiran was astounded. Her guess was actually pretty reasonable. "That's a bit far-fetched," he eventually said. "Oh yeah?" Her resentment was conveyed through her airy reply. "I'm going to meet her," Kiran declared the next instant. "You just called my guess far-fetched a second ago, and now you're going to meet her," Yvonne grumbled. "Her bodyguard kidnapped Serena," Kiran explained. "Her bodyguard?" Yvonne stared at him in bewilderment. "That's right. Her name is Lindsay Ludwig. She's the daughter of PowerHub Investment Group's CEO and my enemy," Kiran added. "Then, you have to be careful." The sulkiness in Yvonne's voice was instantly replaced by concern, but it still carried a strange undertone. Kiran knew what she was implying. "You're from the Quinn family, which means you're also my enemy, doesn't it?" Yvonne's head snapped up, a trace of sorrow flashing in her eyes as if to say, "Don't you have any feelings for me?" She was crestfallen when Kiran remained silent, and she kept quiet as well. Kiran arrived outside the room opposite Yvonne's without a word. He lifted a hand to open the door. "You're not gonna knock?" Yvonne still sounded petulant. "She's waiting for me!" With a twist of Kiran's wrist, the door opened easily. It was not locked. Before Yvonne could glance inside, he closed it in her face. With an unhappy sigh, she turned back to her room in annoyance and disappointment. However, an indescribable trepidation was gnawing at her insides. Kiran looked in the direction of the living room. Lindsay was seated on the couch with one leg crossed over the other, holding a thin white lady's cigarette between her right index and middle fingers. When she heard the door open, she plucked it from her lips and blew out a puff of smoke. The cloud of smoke made her seem paler than she already was, and lightly stirred the hair in front of her eyes. Despite the cheerfulness in her almond-shaped eyes, her cold arrogance was visible on her oval face. She was clothed in a black nightgown, bringing out her allure as a mature woman. Femme fatale, that was the best way to describe her. Kiran's arrival did not fluster her in the least. On the contrary, she gently put out her cigarette in the ashtray and slowly stood up. The hem of her silk nightgown fell over her thighs smoothly like a blooming flower, hugging her enchanting curves. With his bag in hand, Kiran approached her calmly. Lindsay did not seem to be surprised by his lack of reaction. "It's about time you showed up. I was right to leave the door unlocked to test you. I figured you wouldn't knock." She beamed radiantly, emanating female pheromones which instantly permeated the room. "But you shouldn't have barged in like that. What if I wasn't wearing clothes? Even if you get naked, I won't bat an eye," Kiran informed her flatly. "Ha! I don't believe that," Lindsay retorted coolly. "Suit yourself." Kiran flopped onto the couch, his gaze falling on the steaming cup of coffee. Without hesitation, he picked it up and downed it. There was a flicker of displeasure in Lindsay's eyes. "That's mine. That's exactly why I drank it. So, you want to kiss me? You didn't have to do it so indirectly, you know?" She scoffed. "I want to sleep with you?" Kiran tossed the bag containing the maid outfit into her lap with a plop. "Sleep with me?" Ignoring the bag, Lindsay raised her voice, but the fury in her eyes died down quickly. "Don't you know I'm the one in control now? You're in my territory, so I'm the one in control," Kiran replied nonchalantly. A cruel smirk appeared on her oval face. "Turns out you don't have any dependable aides in Bayville." "What do you mean?" "You sent that beautiful woman to follow me. I bet she loves you, doesn't she?" She sat down right in front of Kiran, crossed her left leg over her right, and wiggled her creamy foot at him in a deliberate attempt to seduce him. Kiran darted a glance at her foot and could not help his heart from pounding. It was undeniably bewitching, especially when paired with her mature feminine aura. "Aren't you going to sleep with me?" "Come on." Lindsay stared at him with a half smile, her toes twitching as if beckoning to him. "Are you ready?" Kiran's lips quirked. "Yeah, I showered the moment I got here, so I'm really clean now." Lindsay chuckled fearlessly. "You don't strike me as the type who enjoys cheating on your husband." Kiran smiled. Lindsay's eyes flashed with anger before swiftly returning to calmness. "That's between us. It's none of your business." Kiran's smile stretched into a grin as he regarded her steadily. "It's very much my business." "What do you mean?" "You're basically a married virgin. How did you and your husband do it?" His attention went to her mouth, then glided down to her chest, hands, and finally stopped at her feet. She did not understand the significance of his gaze. "What does that have to do with you?" Her cluelessness dumbfounded Kiran. Could it be that she was a user of the other hole? Lindsay frowned in confusion at his reaction. "What do you mean?" "I didn't know you were different from other women," Kiran offered a suggestive comment. Naturally, Lindsay was oblivious to his implication and she sneered. Of course! In her opinion, she was not like the others. Any other woman would have immediately exploded and retaliated against Kiran, but she had not. Instead, she had chosen to sit in this room and wait for him to show up at her door. She was a fan of science fantasy films. Her role model was Princess Leia from Star Wars, and she had always aspired to become a woman like that. That was why she could behave in such a calm and composed manner. "Being different is a good thing," Kiran added, chapter 374. Lindsay could not understand what Kiran meant. All she could think about was if Kiran could be the Han Solo to her Princess Leia. She wanted to find a male counterpart like Han Solo. It would be a dream come true to find someone who could give her a sense of accomplishment and perhaps even make her feel more valuable. For so many years, she had never met such a man. Kiran was the only man who showed such potential. That was why she wanted to find out whether he could be her Han Solo. She raised her beautifully arched eyebrows and looked at Kiran. "So what if I'm different? How does that affect you?" "Didn't I say that being different is a good thing?" Kiran asked smilingly. "How is that a good thing?" Lindsay asked. Kiran pursed his lips and pointed at the bag next to him. "Since you're so different, put that on. I'd like to see you in it." "Put that on?" Lindsay curiously opened the bag and saw a black lump. She did not know what it was, so she pulled it out. After getting a clear view, her cheeks were burning hot. "Kiran, you pervert! Isn't it different?" Kiran sneered. Lindsay stood up, her red lips twitching as she looked at Kiran. "Different, huh? Fine." She controlled her anger and grabbed the hem of her nightgown to take it off in front of him. She fixated her gaze on Kiran to see how he would react. Kiran stared at her without blinking as if he was afraid to miss even a second of her undressing. Lindsay was dumbstruck. What was this? Was he really going to watch? "Take it off. I want to sleep with you." Seeing her pause, Kiran encouraged her to go on. Lindsay was stupefied. She might have been angry before coming here, but at least she was rational. She had heard about Kiran, that many women liked him, but he only had eyes for snow. That was why she came to stay at Yvonne's Bayville hotel. Not only did she want to see for herself the enmity between the Quinn family and the York family, but she also wanted to find out more about Kiran and Yvonne's relationship. She thought that Kiran would steer clear or be cautious around other women, so she teased Kiran on purpose by stripping. Little did she know Kiran would tell her to take it off and say that he wanted to sleep with her. She never intended to take her clothes off, let alone sleep with him. She was embarrassed. "I can't wait to see the view under your nightgown, so take them off now," Kiran urged impatiently. Pervert," Lindsay cursed at him. Kiran ignored Lindsay's anger and stared at her slender legs. "You got long legs. You seem to be quite flexible, too. Do you do yoga regularly? I like doing it in difficult positions." "First, Lindsay let go of the nightgown she was about to take off. The fabric draped over her, swaying like leaves in the wind. It covered her delicate figure and accentuated her sensual charm. Lindsay had already bent down to pick up the ashtray on the table, preparing to hit Kiran with just then, Kiran appeared in front of her like a bolt of lightning. Before she knew it, he pushed her down onto the sofa. "Ah," Lindsay screamed and looked at Kiran, horrified. What are you doing?" "I'm going to sleep with you," Kiran said. "Pervert! You!" Before she could say the next words, Lindsay was petrified. Kiran had ripped her nightgown down the middle. The most shocking thing was how precise the force of the knife was. It was just enough to rip apart all her underwear without scratching her skin. The cool breeze made her heart freeze, creating a chilling sensation. Kiran opened the bag and took out the maid costume inside. He looked at Lindsay and said, "You can choose to be naked, or you can wear this." You're such an animal. Your wife will find out about this." Lindsay's eyes burst into flames. "Are you going to wear it or not?" Kiran asked domineeringly. I won't." Lindsay was reminded of her previous phone call with Kiran where he asked her to be his maid. Wearing it would mean surrendering to him and losing her dignity. "Fine then." Kiran tugged at Lindsay's nightgown and tossed it aside. Lindsay was completely naked, and she instinctively reached to cover her private parts. Then she calmed her angered expression and removed her hands. She glared at him and said, "Bring it on then," she shouted and parted her legs, waiting for Kiran to come to her. Kiran was actually shocked. He was just scaring Lindsay to ask about Serena's whereabouts. He did not expect her to be so bold after her nervous reaction earlier. He was taken aback and did not know what to say. "Don't look away. Look at me." Lindsay saw Kiran avoiding her, so she shouted at him fearlessly. Kiran was at a loss. He did not expect her to be so aggressive. Soon, he figured out a way. As the heiress of the Ludwig family, she had a proper standing in PowerHub Investment Group. He had already come this far, so he could not back down to her provocation. Kiran took out his phone and said, "Since you want people to see you so badly, I have a better idea." When Lindsay heard that, her ears were ringing. She said that because Kiran had already seen everything anyway, so he might as well just see all of her. She did not want to lose, so she provoked him on purpose. However, there was no way she would ever let Kiran take photos and videos of her. What if Kiran was perverted enough to upload them online? How was she going to survive in this world? "Kiran, if you dare take pictures of me, I'll jump off this building right now." Lindsay stood up and grabbed her torn nightgown to cover up. "Die then! Why should I care?" Kiran was indifferent. Lindsay wanted to curse Kiran to death, but she maintained her composure and sneered at him. "If I die, Serena will die too, and she'll be buried with me." Kiran frowned without saying anything. Lindsay was certain that she had made the right call, so she said to him, "Are you still going to make me?" "If you let her go, I'll forget about today for the time being." Kiran sounded cold. "In your dreams." Lindsay rejected him right away. "I don't like repeating myself," Kiran warned her. "If you like cardio, come at me. I'm not afraid of you." Lindsay was bossy and provocative. "You said it." Kiran slowly walked toward Lindsay. Although Lindsay was scared, she did not think that Kiran would do it, so she sat firmly on the sofa. Kiran's gaze became cold. She was one difficult woman, but he had a plan. Chapter 375. If you're a man, just do it. Stop beating around the bush. What's the big deal? "I'm more experienced than you know," Lindsay said confidently with her cheeks flushed. Kiran curled his lips wickedly. "How do you have experience when you're still a virgin? You're so shameless." Lindsay's face dropped before regaining her composure. "I repaired my hymen with surgery. Why do you care? Others may fall for it, but I won't because I'm a doctor," Kiran said smugly. "See, come on then. I'm not afraid of you." Lindsay did not expect Kiran to see through her lie, but she still continued the act. "I know you're not scared of me, but—" Before he finished his sentence, his hand was already on her body. What are you doing?" Lindsay looked panicked. She quickly scoffed. "Kiran, are you afraid of what I'll do to you in bed? I bet sleeping with you will be as boring as sleeping with a dead person." Kiran smirked and opened the bag. When Lindsay saw the maid costume inside, her head was spinning. "You can't put this on me." Kiran was already putting it on her. "Pervert, I hate you!" Lindsay was panicking, and she sounded like she was choking back tears. Kiran did not care. He put it on her and was secretly glad that Snow had put it on that morning. Otherwise, he would have zero clue on how to put it on her. Lindsay felt like she was doomed. She wanted to die on the spot. She was the eldest daughter of PowerHub Investment Group, a figure that was admired by countless people. To avoid interference in her marital affairs, she even found herself a fake husband and orchestrated his death, making her a black widow. Over the years, people had been pestering her less about marriage, but she had become more distant and arrogant too. She never imagined that Kiran would do this to her. Did he want her to die of embarrassment? Tesk, tesk. After Kiran was done putting it on her, he clicked his tongue as if he were taking in the view. "Kiran, unblock my pressure points right now, or I will kill myself," Lindsay shouted at Kiran. "It's not my business if you want to kill yourself, but there's something I have to do before that," Kiran said calmly. "What is it?" Lindsay asked nervously. "Do you want me to give you a photo shoot, or do you want me to bring some men over? Bastard! If I post these photos online, it will be captioned, 'Lonely and Desperate Widow.'" Lindsay almost burst into flames. "If you want me to look for some men instead, I'll caption the post as, 'Rich woman in hotel seeking men. One won't be enough.'" "Kiran? I'll let her go." Lindsay was not scared of Kiran, but she was afraid that he would do what he just said. If that happened, she would rather die. Kiran let out a sigh of relief now that he had won. With a light tap, Lindsay was able to move again. Lindsay picked up the ashtray on the table and was about to hit Kiran again. "If you move or curse at me again, I'll take photos of you." Lindsay looked down at the maid costume she was wearing and was so frightened that she immediately put the ashtray down. Only after she covered herself with her torn nightgown did she feel more at ease. She glared fiercely at Kiran, realizing that he was not paying any attention to her at all. She knew she was wasting her time because there was no way she could defeat him. In the end, she helplessly picked up the phone and made a call. The call quickly got through, and Lindsay said, "Send Serena to my room." She slammed the phone down. Kiran was relieved. He smiled at her and comforted her. "Don't be mad, you fool." Lindsay suddenly remembered Kiran's threat, so she stopped herself from finishing that sentence. She stared at Kiran and said, "I'll kill you." "Ha," Kiran chuckled. "The eldest daughter of the Ludwig family is quite tough. Instead of being angry, I think you should feel lucky." "Lucky?" Lindsay sneered in disdain. Kiran nodded. "You're lucky. If it weren't for my kind heart, you would have been on your way to meet Mr. Lopez by now." "Did you kill him?" Lindsay did not know that he was dead. "Zachary is dead too," Kiran said to Lindsay casually. "You killed him too?" Lindsay stood up in shock. She was so furious that she did not even care about her exposed body. "If you want to know how they died, why don't you die right now so you can ask them?" Kiran smiled. Lindsay's face changed drastically. If Kiran was this cruel to her already, she should not be surprised that he killed Wendell and the others. Kiran was testing her to see if she knew about Wendell's death. If they died from poisoning, there was a high possibility that the people from the School of Medicine did it. The Ludwig family was acquainted with Quentin, so the people from the School of Medicine would have found out about this. Seeing her anger toward him, he got even more confused. If not her, who killed Wendell and the others? "Kiran, no matter how strong you are, you have no right to kill people as you wish." "I won't forget this." Lindsay was angry and grudging. Kiran shook off his thoughts and sneered, "I don't care what you'll do, but I have a question." "What question?" Lindsay asked. "The Ludwig family should have a lot of enemies, right?" "Enemies?" Lindsay frowned. She was lost in thought as she pondered which one of their enemies could have killed Wendell. She quickly looked up and denied it. "What are you talking about? Our family doesn't have any enemies." Kiran already had a feeling. It seems like PowerHub Investment Group has done a lot of bad deeds over the years. I'm sure some people despise the Ludwig family. "If people want to hate us, they need to have the power to back up their hatred," Lindsay said annoyedly. Kiran said joyfully, "They'll have the power, all right. If you think you could manipulate me with your words, dream on," Lindsay retorted. Kiran smiled. "I'm not trying to trick you, but I'm telling you that it was your family's enemy who killed Wendell, but I have no idea who." "It wasn't you?" Lindsay asked in surprise. "I didn't even kill you, so why would I kill those little shits?" Kiran said disdainfully. Lindsay froze. Kiran was right. He never intended to kill her. Otherwise, she would have been dead by now. If he did not kill Wendell and the others, who did? She began to think of PowerHub's enemies. Little did she know she had fallen into his trap. He wanted Lindsay to find the enemy so he would have allies to uncover the identity of the real murderer. The room fell silent as Lindsay was deep in thought. 20 minutes later, there was a knock on the room door. Chapter 376. Come in! Lindsay came to her senses and shouted at the door. The door opened, and 4 men walked in with Serena. Serena's clothes were still intact, and her hair was still neat. She was just unconscious. Kiran was relieved to see that she was not in danger, but the 4 men who walked in were much stronger than Gregory. However, he was not concerned. He smirked and walked toward one of the men holding Serena. The man was Thor, which stood for the T in WRTL. Thor had a tall and muscular physique, and he exuded a strong masculine aura. If he clenched his hands into a fist, it would probably be as big as a medium-sized bowl. Kiran was certain that Thor could kill a bull with a single punch. However, Kiran was not threatened by him at all. Meanwhile, Windsor, Rainier, and Bolt were already on high alert, ready to attack Kiran at any time. As Kiran got closer and closer to the 4, they mustered their strength. Their clothes started swaying as they prepared themselves for any impending attack. They waited for Kiran to approach them before they unleashed their full force to engage in a fierce battle. Get out! At that critical moment, Lindsay ordered the 4 men to leave. The 4 men exchanged glances of doubt. Although Lindsay was not properly dressed, there was a firm look on her face. They dared not disobey her, so they nodded. Thor passed Serena over to Kiran and left with the others. Kiran held Serena in his arms and tapped her gently. Oh. Serena let out a soft cry and opened her eyes slowly. When she saw Kiran, she was over the moon. She opened her arms to hug him around the neck, and she bawled like he was going to disappear if she let go. Kiran held Serena awkwardly. Serena was already tall and curvy, but her brown wavy hair made her look all the more attractive. She clung onto Kiran and rocked back and forth like waves. Kiran looked at her teary eyes that were filled with joy, and his heart swelled with pity. After her brief excitement, she calmed down. Only then did she notice Lindsay in a maid costume and ripped nightgown. What shocked her even more was that the maid costume Lindsay wore was the one she bought Snow. She pushed Kiran away and said in disbelief, "Isn't that the maid costume I bought for Snow?" Kiran was stunned. "How did you know?" "Duh, I bought it for her," Serena shouted. Lindsay's head was spinning. She did not think that the maid costume that Kiran forced her to wear belonged to his wife. Did that mean that she was wearing a hand-me-down? This was too humiliating for an egotistical woman like her. She gave Kiran a lethal stare, hoping that Serena was just mistaken. Kiran scratched his nose and said honestly, "Snow looks so good in the maid costume that I brought it here for Lindsay to try on." "Snow has worn this?" Lindsay was losing her mind as she was overwhelmed with disgust. Serena froze and stared at Kiran. "Did Snow put it on for you?" Kiran was puzzled. He firmly nodded and said, "Of course. How else would I know how to put it on?" Lindsay finally understood how he managed to put it on her so effortlessly just now. It turned out that he had seen Snow in it before. She felt even more repulsed, knowing that Snow had worn it before. She was losing her mind. "Kiran, has this been washed?" Lindsay was practically roaring at this point. Kiran shook his head. "She just wore it this morning. It wouldn't dry in time, even if it was washed." "You pervert." Lindsay was going crazy. She wanted to take it off, but she could not. She stamped her feet, wanting to go up and bite Kiran. The shocked Serena was smiling happily. She patted Kiran on the shoulder and said, "Kiran, you're so naughty!" Kiran was speechless. Was she praising him for being naughty? "I like it, though." Hee. Serena smiled at the angry Lindsay like a flower in full bloom. "You look good in it. I think all men would be fired up if they see you in it." "Shut up!" Lindsay shouted angrily. Serena ignored Lindsay's fury and said to Kiran, "Kiran, I found all the men you asked me to find. Why don't we call them to accompany Ms. Lindsay?" Serena looked at Lindsay excitedly and clicked her tongue. "I'm just not sure how many men are enough to satisfy her. I'm afraid that once they see her, they'll—" "Shut up!" Lindsay was furious. She picked up the ashtray and threw it at her. Serena was quick enough to hide behind Kiran. With a loud crash, the ashtray hit the wall behind her and shattered. Seeing as she missed, Lindsay hurriedly looked around for something else to throw. Kiran shouted, "Stop!" Lindsay shivered and stopped immediately. She looked at him and said, "You two are such perverts. You can just kill me." "Kiran, if she wants to die, we should help her," Serena said with a provocative smile. Kiran did not move. Serena was unhappy. "Are you hesitating because you're attracted to her?" Kiran ignored Serena and turned to Lindsay. "You have a choice." "What choice?" Lindsay asked furiously. "You can choose to live a normal life or to live a life worse than death." Kiran sounded cold. "What will happen if I choose the latter?" Lindsay was unwilling to give in. Kiran smiled. "We'll do what Serena said. I believe those men would love you and just want to stay with you forever. I bet you'll give birth to their children and—" Shut the fuck up! Lindsay cursed as she was about to burst into flames. I think that's a great idea, Serena clapped excitedly. She was no longer angry at Kiran. What's the other option? Lindsay asked angrily. The second option is simple. Kiran's lips curled into a suggestive smirk. Chapter 377. Just say it, Lindsay shouted at Kiran angrily. She just wanted them both to leave so she could put an end to this humiliation. Be my maid, Kiran smiled. Fuck you, Lindsay yelled. Sorry, I'm not interested in fucking an old hag. Kiran shook his head. If he wanted to, he would pick a young girl like me, Serena said smilingly. I'll fight you. Lindsay furiously ran toward Kiran as if she was going to fight him. You chose the wrong place to tackle him, Serena giggled. Lindsay stopped in her tracks. What do you mean? If you tackle him in bed, you might stand a chance. Serena stared at her legs lecherously as if she were a man. Fuck off. I'd rather sleep with any other man than that bastard. Lindsay was enraged. The options Kiran gave her were already perverse enough. Now, with Serena's perverse thinking, Lindsay felt like she was trapped in a wolf's den. Kiran was calm. He sat on the sofa and smiled at Lindsay. So, have you decided? Kiran's patience is limited, Serena urged. Serena ran up behind him and started to massage him like an obedient little girl. Instead of rejecting it, Kiran closed his eyes and enjoyed it. The sight of that made Lindsay even more furious. Kiran, after Lindsay becomes your maid, she can do massages for you. If she does a bad job, you can hit her. Kiran, what game are you playing? Kiran won't want to play games with you, Serena said first. Kiran smiled faintly at Lindsay. I like you. Lindsay froze and shivered as she got goosebumps all over. Like her, she felt uneasy and nervous. Kiran, how could you abandon me after finding a new woman? I can wear the maid costume for you too. Serena expressed her dissatisfaction. Kiran did not say anything to her. Instead, he looked at Lindsay and continued, I like you because you're a smart woman. Phew! Lindsay exhaled in relief. She was worried that Kiran had bad intentions. Irritated, she asked, What exactly are you trying to do? Kiran secretly admired her for her headstrongness. Even in such a tense situation, she was still rational. He nodded and asked, I'm guessing you don't want to be a maid, right? Duh, Lindsay retorted. Kiran said, Give me $6 billion right now, and you will buy your freedom with $500 million every month. What did you say? Are you crazy? Lindsay shouted in anger. Kiran, you're a genius. Serena lowered her head to kiss his cheek and said, With $500 million a month, you can hire any maid you want. Some might even be willing to conceive your children. Kiran was taken aback. The first half of her words were decent, but the second half made him speechless. Most importantly, how dare she kiss him on the cheek? However, he did not say anything for now. Serena's teasing was very effective in putting pressure on Lindsay. Kiran recalled Wendell's advice. He agreed that killing Lindsay now would be easy, but that was not his goal. He wanted to make her hate him even more so she would seek revenge. Only then would he have the chance to understand PowerHub and his potential allies. In his opinion, asking money from that maid of his was the best way of achieving that. Fuck, Lindsay blurted, no longer caring about her image. She walked over to take out the checkbook from her bag and wrote a check for $7 billion. She threw it at Kiran and said, Take this and get out of here. Serena took it and saw that she had given him $7 billion. Impressive. You even gave an extra $1 billion. Kiran raised his eyebrows. PowerHub was filthy rich. Money was not an issue in Lindsay's eyes at all. That extra $1 billion is to pay for Kiran's grave. Lindsay spat fire at Kiran. Kiran ignored her words and smirked at her. It could be our child's college fund. Go to hell. No one would give birth to your child. Hearing about conceiving his child, Lindsay almost had a stroke. Kiran, I'll give birth to your child first. When her child misbehaves, my child will beat them up. Serena found a way to annoy her again. Fuck off! Lindsay could not bear their mockery, so she yelled at them. Just as Serena was about to snap back, Kiran stopped her and glared at Lindsay. Work hard. Make sure you earn enough money to buy next year's freedom. Fuck you! Lindsay was so angry that she took off her ruined nightgown and threw it at him. Why don't you take off your maid costume? Serena sneered at Lindsay provocatively. Lindsay was about to take it off, but when she saw Serena take out her phone, she immediately stopped out of fear. Kiran, she must like the maid costume so much that she doesn't want to take it off, Serena teased. Let's go. Seeing as the fun was over, Kiran stopped messing with her and pulled Serena away. Rumble. Kiran and Serena heard things getting thrown around in the room and they smiled, knowing that they had angered Lindsay. Lindsay was still in the room wearing the maid costume. She walked in front of the mirror and looked at herself for a full minute before taking her phone out to take photos. Then she said gloomily, "Kiran, I won't forget this humiliation. One day, I'll turn you into a male prostitute and have women exhaust you to death in bed. I'll make you all die a tragic death." Lindsay cursed angrily and took off the maid costume. She ran into the bathroom and started scrubbing frantically, wanting to scrub off a layer of her skin. Meanwhile, Kiran and Serena got downstairs. Serena hugged Kiran and said, "Kiran, I love you so much!" Kiran froze. "Have you lost your mind again?" Chapter 378. Serena was stunned. She burst out laughing. "Kiran, you're so naughty. Can't you see that I'm worshipping you?" Kiran glared at her. "Forget it. I really do worship you. Aren't you going to ask me why?" Serena grabbed Kiran's arm and shook him. "Why?" Kiran stopped in his tracks. "Never in my wildest dreams would I have imagined that a woman like Snow would put on the maid costume for you." Kiran wiped his forehead. "Don't be like that. I'm being serious. It would make sense if I wore it because I like you and I'm trying to seduce you. But she's the arrogant and reserved Snow. Don't you feel a sense of accomplishment knowing that the #1 beauty in Bayville wore that costume for you?" Serena said in a gossipy manner. Kiran gave it some thought and nodded after realizing she was right. "I'm not wrong for worshipping you, right?" Serena asked. "Nope. Anything else?" Kiran asked curiously. "The other thing is how unaffected you were when you saw Lindsay in the costume." "That's impressive," Serena burst out laughing. Kiran's relaxed expression vanished, replaced with frustration. "I'm being for real. She gives off such a mature, womanly aura. Even I felt something when I saw her. I'm surprised that you didn't," said Serena. Serena gave him a firm thumbs up. "Are you having a sexuality crisis?" Kiran asked exasperatedly and glared at her. Hee. Instead of getting angry, Serena laughed. "What are you laughing about?" Kiran was puzzled. "Maybe I am questioning my sexuality. If I like you, does that make you a woman?" "Shut up!" "Kiran, I think there's something wrong with you." She did the opposite of shutting up. "What's wrong with me?" Kiran asked. "There's something wrong with your genitals." Serena quickly ran away from him. Kiran's face turned dark. "Are you kidding me?" "It's not a joke." Serena bent over with laughter. "What is it then?" "Facts." Serena giggled and moved even further away from him. "Snow has helped me in other ways," Kiran blurted out in anger. "Whew!" Serena whistled happily. Kiran knew that he had fallen into her trap. "What do you mean by that?" "I just wanted to let you know that Snow's surprise is all thanks to me," Serena said with a dazzling smile. "Thanks to you?" Kiran was reminded of Snow's techniques and felt his head spin. He wanted to strangle that promiscuous Serena. However, Serena said innocently, "Of course. How else would your wife know how to do that? How could she satisfy your needs and make you come? How—" "Shut up!" Kiran could not take it anymore, so he interrupted her. "Are you embarrassed, Kiran?" Serena was not angry. Kiran glared at her angrily and said, "I get it. Is that all?" "What is it that you get?" Serena stared at Kiran with a smile as she asked curiously. "I get what you're saying," Kiran repeated coldly. "If you don't tell me, I don't know what you know. Let's hear it." Serena became serious. "I have no feelings for Lindsay, so you can rest assured," said Kiran. "You didn't have any feelings for Yvonne in the beginning, too. But what about now? Would you kill her?" Seeing as Kiran understood what she meant, she continued pressing him. She said all that to remind Kiran that Snow really loved him and that he should not disappoint her. "This is different." Kiran held Yvonne in much higher regard after learning about her annual 1-month fast. "What do you mean different?" "Kiran, there are women who love you and would do anything for you. And then, there are women who are nothing but trouble." Serena looked serious. Kiran trembled. The reason for the York family's demise was Zara, his mother, which was why Serena's words stood out to him. "Anything else?" "I'm willing to risk my life for you, and Snow would too, but don't think all women are the same." Serena looked hurt. She took Kiran's arm and said, "Kiran, don't just fall for a woman's looks." It sounded like she was telling him not to give up on his revenge just for a woman. His face burned in embarrassment as if he had been slapped. He nodded and said, "Don't worry, I won't." Serena did not let go of his hand. "Kiran, when a man and a woman are together, it doesn't matter how beautiful a woman is. Once you turn off the lights and go under the covers, they're all the same. The key is—" Kiran covered Serena's mouth. What she said sounded serious at first, but it turned into bullshit again. Serena was overjoyed. She took the opportunity to throw herself into his arms and hug him. Kiran knew that she was being genuine. Since he felt bad about her being kidnapped today, he carried her into the car and put her in the passenger seat before driving off. Their quarrel seemed like a casual interaction. but Yvonne saw everything from upstairs. When Serena mentioned her, Yvonne was filled with ice-cold anger. There was a frigid look on her sickly face. "Serena, you're not even Snow, so who are you to say that about me?" Yvonne was enraged. She turned to look at Lindsay's room opposite hers, and she smirked. "Since you kidnapped Serena, I can do it too. When the time comes, Kiran would automatically assume that it was you who did it." Yvonne smiled smugly. Kiran left Bayville Hotel and took Serena to the bank to cash the $7 billion check. The two of them got out of the car, and Serena hugged Kiran like she was his mistress. Then, a car honked behind them. Neither of them looked over. They just walked faster to get out of the way. However, it kept honking. They were so annoyed that they could not help but turn to look. Kiran realized at first glance that the person inside was Alina, Snow's so-called best friend. She almost let Orion take advantage of Snow, and it seemed like she wanted to cause trouble. He smiled at Alina when he saw her in the car. There was a hint of resentment in Alina's eyes. She opened the car door and ran over with a smile on, her face saying, "Hello, Mr. Kiran. I wasn't sure if it was you, so I honked. I'm sorry for what I did last. Time." She lowered her head to apologize, but she lifted her head slowly on purpose. From that angle, the contrast of her snow-white skin and her black dress was even more eye-catching. Kiran was unfazed, turning a blind eye. However, Serena was not as calm. Chapter 379. "Kiran, it seems like someone is trying to seduce you," Serena said to Kiran. Kiran instantly discerned Alina's insincere apology, so he glanced at Serena and said, "What are you talking about? If she wanted to seduce me, she wouldn't waste her efforts and do it in front of a beautiful woman like you." Serena was stunned. In the next second, she was smiling with her eyes and giggling. "Kiran, do you really think I'm that beautiful? Smooch." She even made the bold move to kiss Kiran on the cheek as if she were asserting her superiority. Alina stood there embarrassed, but there was anger and annoyance in her eyes. Her apology was purposely sarcastic, but they took it seriously. Not only that, but they even ridiculed and humiliated her. Their public display of affection aggravated her even more, but she kept her smile and said, "Mr. Kiran, are you here for business?" Kiran nodded and asked Alina, "Are you here for work?" Alina nodded and said embarrassedly, "Mr. Orion and I work here." "Theft!" Kiran burst out laughing. "You two shitheads are really inseparable." Alina's face turned red when he said that, but she dared not refute it, so she just smiled awkwardly. Kiran was also shocked by her patience. "Shitheads? Kiran, your description is perfect." Serena laughed heartily. Alina gritted her teeth with hatred, but she kept smiling at Kiran. "Mr. Kiran, is there anything I can help you with?" "He doesn't need a bitch like you to sleep with," Serena humiliated her. Alina's expression twisted. She was so infuriated that she wanted to cry, but she dared not do it in front of Kiran. When he had enough fun, he stopped humiliating her and said, "I have $7 billion here that I'd like to cash out. Take it into the bank and find someone to take care of it for me." When Alina heard $7 billion, she felt dizzy, and her heart was filled with anger. How could he hold such power? Not only did he solve the Xander Corporation's huge crisis before, but now he even easily obtained $7 billion. Was it real money? She wanted to become his side chick too. Even if he gave her a tiny bit of his money, it would be enough for the rest of her life. "Is there a problem?" Serena asked when she saw that she did not respond. "No, I'll go do it right now," Alina said, panicking. "Go with her," Kiran said to Serena. Serena nodded and entered the bank with Alina. Kiran was pleased to see Alina getting it done, so he entered the bank alone and walked toward the office area. Since he was wearing name-brand clothes and looked outstanding, no one questioned his identity, nor did anyone stop him. He smoothly walked into the manager's office. The closer he got to the office, the wider and more sarcastic his smile got. "Creak!" Kiran opened the door right away. "Ah!" two people exclaimed, and there were sounds of a woman hurriedly adjusting her clothes. "Who is it?" Orion growled. The moment he lay eyes on Kiran, he bolted upright like a spring. "Mr. Kiran." There were still beads of sweat on the woman's face. Her stockings were not even on yet. She was furious when she saw the man, but Orion's stuttering made that anger vanish, so she bit her tongue. "Are you done?" Kiran said to Orion calmly. I'm done. Mr. Kiran, please sit down." Orion smiled while readjusting his pants. He turned to the woman and said sternly, "Get out of here right now." "Yes, sir." When the woman saw the eldest son of the Marsh family being so scared, she could not help but be scared too. After nodding repeatedly, she scurried off. However, when the woman walked to the door, Serena and Alina were just coming in. "Office romance?" Serena was quick enough to notice, so she joked. The woman lowered her head in fear of meeting Alina's piercing gaze. Alina was furious. Everyone knew about her relationship with Orion, yet she still dared to seduce him and have sex with him. She must have a death wish. However, she could not get angry now, so she just held a grudge. Orion was afraid of a fight breaking out, so he quickly shouted to Alina. "What's the matter?" Alina dared not get worked up in front of Orion since she was just his plaything too. "Mr. Orion, Mr. Kiran has a check for $7 billion he wants to cash. I've finished the processing, so I just need your approval." "Mr. Kiran, you sure are rich," Orion flattered him. He took the device from Alina and clicked on it to review it. Kiran had already sat down, waiting for Orion to do his job. Orion was efficient, but when he input his fingerprint, it failed to pass the verification. He was taken aback. He looked at his hand as if he were confirming whether it was really his hand. "Mr. Orion, are you having trouble getting in?" Alina asked curiously. "I don't know." Orion tried to enter his fingerprint again, but it still failed. "What's going on?" Orion asked. "Did you ruin your hand from touching that woman just now?" Serena joked. Orion's face turned red when she said that, and the resentment in Alina grew. Kiran was also getting curious now. He knew for sure that it was not because of the reasons Serena gave, so he looked at Orion. "You can't access it?" Orion shook his head awkwardly. With cold sweat all over his forehead, he looked at Kiran nervously and said, "I can't access it." Kiran looked at Alina. "Is anyone else cashing a check too? Test it to see if he still has access." "I'll go do it now." Alina immediately went out to find someone, and it just so happened that someone came to do just that. The customer went through the fast track, and when it came to Orion's turn, he entered the system and completed the operation smoothly. Orion confusedly stared at his hands. "What's going on?" Kiran had a rough idea of what was going on, so he smirked. "Very funny, Lindsay." "Kiran, are you saying that she did something to it?" Serena was reminded of how they got the check. Instead of replying to Serena, he took his phone out to call Yvonne. Yvonne happily picked up and said in a sweet voice, "Mr. Kiran, go to Lindsay's room across from you and give her the phone." "I have something to take care of," said Kiran. "Okay." Yvonne was disappointed, but she did not ask him any questions. She immediately went to knock on her door. Lindsay had just come out of the shower, and she looked incredibly sexy and enchanting. Chapter 380. Lindsay's skin was as white as snow. She was wiping her wet hair in the living room with a towel wrapped around her. She was as graceful as a fairy. She always had a strong and mature air about her that would drive men crazy. Completely different from Snow's cold beauty, Lillian's ethereal beauty, and Yvonne's sickly beauty. Her biggest charm was her womanly nature. Knock, knock, knock. Yvonne knocked on her door. Lindsay was surprised as she was not expecting anyone. She walked over and opened the door. She saw Yvonne in a white jacket, standing at the door with a phone in her hand. Although she knew who Yvonne was, she pretended not to know her. She asked with an upset face, "Who are you looking for?" "Kiran called to look for you." Yvonne handed Lindsay the phone without any emotion as she pretended not to know her too. Lindsay was startled. She took the phone and asked resentfully, "What is it?" "Lindsay, I can't cash out the $7 billion check you gave me." "What do you think I should do?" Kiran said calmly. "So that's why you called." "Kiran, do you understand why I'm different now?" Lindsay's tone was arrogant and prideful. "Is this how PowerHub is different from the others?" Kiran's voice was calm. "That's one way to put it." Lindsay sounded even more pleased. PowerHub Investment Group could not be described in just one sentence. There were many intricate and complex interests involved, so although the Ludwig family was in charge, they could not dominate it alone. Did Kiran really think that he was all that? Lindsay was proud. "There's something else. Would you like to hear it?" Kiran asked. "What is it?" Lindsay sneered. "You need to compensate me for mental damages and wasted time," said Kiran. "You're so greedy," Lindsay scoffed. "I've already sent my bank details to Yvonne's phone, so you can transfer $10 billion to me." Kiran hung up. Lindsay's face darkened when she heard the dial tone. "Damn you, Kiran, you're insane!" "Who said you could push me around like that?" Yvonne looked at the enraged Lindsay without saying a word. Lindsay looked furious. She started to fiddle with Yvonne's phone and walked toward the coffee table. She clicked on Kiran's message and cursed. "Kiran, I'm going to get a bunch of fat women to rape you." While saying that, she took out her phone to take a picture of the text message on Yvonne's phone. Then she angrily walked toward Yvonne. The moment Lindsay handed her the phone, she lightly brushed over the back of her phone cover and slipped a thin needle into her hand. Her movements were discreet, but Yvonne saw everything. Her face had always been pale, so her expression did not give her away when she noticed it. Lindsay's eyes gleamed as she asked Yvonne, "Are you Kiran's woman?" Although Lindsay was holding a weapon, Yvonne still let her guard down. She shook her head and said, "No, I'm not worthy enough." "How could Kiran not fall for your beauty?" There was a hint of ridicule and disbelief in her tone. Yvonne took her phone and said calmly, "Kiran only loves snow." "I guess you're just not charming enough," Lindsay provoked her on purpose. Meanwhile, she reached out the hand that was holding the phone toward Yvonne. Yvonne pretended to fall for it. In the next second, Yvonne felt a prick on her palm. Her arm felt numb and swollen. She could have stopped the poison, but she did not. Instead, she feigned confusion and lifted her hands to her head, but before she could touch her forehead, she plopped to the ground. Lindsay opened her palm to look at the needle, thin as a strand of hair, and smirked. "Kiran, even if my self-defense doesn't work on you, that doesn't mean that it won't work on your woman." Her gaze fell upon Yvonne. "Kiran doesn't have feelings for you because you're not enticing enough, but don't worry, I can help you." She put away the needle and smiled. She began to undress Yvonne and put the maid costume on her as how Kiran did to her. Yvonne was not unconscious at all. She was embarrassed about her naked body, but she figured that Lindsay was using her to blackmail Kiran. She did not mind being naked as she wanted Kiran to see her like this. Since he only gave her a back massage, he had not seen her full body yet, so she wanted to make up for it. When she noticed Lindsay was putting her in a maid costume, not only was she not nervous, but she was thrilled. Lindsay did not know she was faking it, so she quickly put the costume on her. Once she was satisfied, she took her phone out to take pictures and videos. After taking photos, she passed it through a system, and the smile on her face grew wider. Just as she was about to take photos with Yvonne's phone, Kiran called again. Lindsay smiled sinisterly before answering, "What is it? Do you have the money? I don't want to waste time." Kiran was impatient. "I need some time. It's in the middle of processing." After saying that, Lindsay hung up. Kiran was irritated when he heard the dial tone. He was about to put his phone away when he received a video from Yvonne's WhatsApp. He clicked into it and saw Yvonne lying on the ground in a maid outfit. She was in Lindsay's room, and Lindsay was even talking about her body in detail. Kiran's face darkened, and he stood up. Immediately, his phone vibrated repeatedly. This time, there were more photos of Yvonne in the maid outfit. There were even close-ups. "Damn it," Kiran blurted. Just then, Yvonne called. Kiran knew that it was Lindsay, so he answered angrily, "Lindsay, do you have a death wish?" "Kiran, why are you angry? You should thank me for showing you such masterpieces." Lindsay sounded pleased and ecstatic. "Just you wait." Kiran hung up angrily. "Let's go," Kiran told Serena before stomping out of Orion's office. Orion and Alina were in a daze while Serena quickly followed him out. Kiran frantically rushed over to Bayville Hotel.